it's my pleasure to welcome our speakers and panelists here to this last session called Towards a Green Central Asia, Preventive and Stabilizing Climate Foreign Policy. And I would like to give the names of our panelists. First, on my right is Dr. Anna Lührmann, Minister of State for Europe and Climate here at the Federal Foreign Office, Anna Lührmann. And I think she deserves an applause from you. On my right-hand side as well is Mr. Aibek Moldogaziev, Deputy Foreign Minister of the Kyrgyz Republic. So he's come a long way here to Berlin, and also a good hand for him. Left of me, Dr. Fred Hattermann. He's from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, where he is the Deputy Head of the Research Department. Also, welcome to you. Then we have Mrs. Ingrid-Gabriela Hoven, Managing Director for the German International Corporation GIZ. Thank you for being here. And last, and certainly but not least, Mr. Zafar Makhmudov, Director of the Central Asia Regional Environment Center, CAREC in Almaty in Kazakhstan. Thank you for coming over, and also an applause for you. So, you have gone through a full day of discussions, of lectures, of interesting dialogues, I hope. And at the end of this full day of inspiring and thoughtful sessions, I hope I'm pleased to moderate this last session that shifts the focus from climate security from the conceptual sphere to the operational level, to the concrete geographical level. Together with the distinguished guests, we'll look at a region perhaps less well known by many here in this room, albeit its ancient history and geostrategic importance, of course, make it a very exciting region, and I'm talking about the Central Asia region. With Germany's long-term engagement in Central Asia, including on contentious issues such as transboundary water management, and more recently also on climate-related challenges, we've had a long history of partnering with the region. And our joint efforts were consistently geared towards bolstering Central Asia's resilience against external climate-induced threats. A cooperative, multidisciplinary approach has been the first tool of our choice to address a complex issue such as climate-related risks. And therefore, I'm pleased to invite now State Minister Dr. Anna Lührmann to elaborate further on this approach and why we believe it could serve as a blueprint for other climate-sensitive operations on the ground. Anna Lührmann, the floor is yours.
Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the climate crisis is the key global security crisis of the 21st century. In times of rapid global warming, we must factor in the impact of the climate crisis on stability, on human security in our foreign and security policy. Climate policy is thus an integral part of our foreign policy. We want to advance the concept of climate and security through climate-sensitive approaches on the ground. Since we can look back, indeed, as you mentioned, on a long-standing and very fruitful partnership on climate security and water, the joint efforts of Central Asian countries and Germany, these can serve as a blueprint on how to put the conflict and security concept into practice in different regions of the world. And I'm sure that my esteemed colleague, the Kyrgyz colleague, the Deputy Foreign Minister, Moldogaziev, has a much deeper insight on the region, but let me just cite a few very, very alarming facts from this year's IPCC report, which show indeed the need for very immediate action. Central Asia is indeed one of the world's regions that is hit the most by the climate crisis, and in particular when it comes to water stress. And projections even show temperature increases up to 6.5 degrees Celsius. And actually, it gave me a pause when I read this morning in my draft speech. 6.5 degrees. This is not really something we can really imagine, how we can live in a region that is 6.5 degrees warmer. So let's do our best to avert this. However, we also have to prepare through adaptation. So and that is what we've also come here to talk about with the climate and security agenda. Effects, as we know, of this increased temperature include altered precipitation regimes, more frequent heat extremes, and an increasing aridity, which will have a very negative impact on agricultural production, challenging food security and the ecological environment. And Germany indeed has been a very long-standing partner of Central Asia in establishing early warning systems for climate-related risks, especially with regard to the uncertain water cycle that is increasingly responsible for natural disasters such as flooding and mudflows. The so-called Berlin process supported our Central Asian partners from 2008 to 2019 on advancing sustainable transboundary water management across the region with a goal to improve the integrated, equitable and fair water resource management between all countries. Building on these efforts, in January 2020, we jointly launched the Green Central Asia Initiative, a high-level political dialogue on climate, security and environment. The joint declaration adopted on the occasion highlights the political will to strengthen regional cooperation on shared climate-induced challenges even more. Partner countries are currently implementing the joint regional action plan. Until the end of the year, a regional strategy on climate adaptation will identify gaps in national and regional capacities. It will also recommend a joint Central Asian finance mechanism, including private and business sectors. In addition, capacity building activities and scientific knowledge transfer are already underway. Let me highlight two important features of Green Central Asia as a best practice example of concrete cooperation on climate mitigation and adaptation. Green Central Asia embraces a vast region with countries that share so many commonalities, but also challenges. With the help of our main implementing partner present here, the German International Corporation, GIZ, we explore cooperative mechanisms to identify win-win opportunities for everyone. Our European experience is very helpful for this kind of support, geared towards the promotion of a peaceful and prosperous Central Asia region. Preventive foreign policies such as early warning and early action need data and appropriate information sharing tools. Hence, with established partners such as the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and the German Research Center for Geosciences, we want to promote evidence-based policymaking. I look forward to listening more to Dr. Hattermann, who will explain this in more detail. Before I close, let me highlight 3 points. First, cross-border cooperation is an imperative for resilience and for tackling transboundary challenges effectively. Glaciers, river basins, and natural habitats do not stop at any border. Such a cooperative approach enhances resilience against climate-related and environmental hazards and gives Central Asian countries a stronger voice in a multilateral context, be it on climate change, on sustainable development, or on security. The second message is that we need a comprehensive and multi-sectoral approach to tackle the climate crisis. We need to design our policies on climate, on water and energy policies, but also on food, health and in industry by accounting for their interdependence. For this reason, we apply a whole-of-government approach in which Central Asia or Green Central Asia functions as a clearinghouse for a number of climate-related regional projects implemented by our line ministries. This approach ensures a more targeted measures and a higher impact in the end, which is what we all care for. A third and last message is that also no single donor country can mobilize sufficient resources to counter climate change in all its complexities. Therefore, Germany has closed ranks with the European Union and with European financial institutions to support Central Asia's green growth and transformation through a dedicated regional Team Europe initiative on water, energy and climate change in Central Asia. We consider this a logistical consequence of our pledge to support the implementation of the 2019 EU Central Asia strategy and the newly designed Global Gateway. So, to conclude, this year we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Germany and the 5 Central Asian states. 30 years of a growing partnership with 5 countries in this strategically important region, and the core part of the old connection between Europe and Asia, the Great Silk Road. Let us now jointly work to make Central Asia a more resilient region, well prepared to counter climate-induced security threats, and thus a blueprint for other regions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, State Minister, for these insights into the political cooperation with the region. I would just like to point out one more aspect that I've experienced while traveling through the region actually a couple of times. We often say that we need to cooperate much better to be able to counter the climate crisis and all its effects. But on the other hand, I found that regional cooperation on climate issues, on natural resources, is a wonderful nucleus to have enhanced regional cooperation altogether. And I find this is something which is well illustrated in the Central Asian region with the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea, for example, which was motivated by an ecological reason but helped us bring the region as a whole together. So let's move on to the next speaker, to Mr. Moldogaziev, Deputy Foreign Minister of the Kyrgyz Republic, who will give us his perspective on the issue. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction. First of all, let me welcome all of you, and I would like just to express my gratitude to the German side for arranging and inviting me to this very important event. Today, the seriousness of the climate threat no longer needs proof. The changing climate really creates new hybrid risks for the integrity of the planet's ecosystem, the security of people, and sustainable development of countries. This year it was felt in almost all regions of the world, including Europe and Central Asia. Taking into account that the solution of the problem of climate change requires a comprehensive approach, close cooperation, the adoption of urgent and practical measures, I would like to note the importance of the current climate conference and today's meeting. As you know, Central Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions in the world to climate change. The Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and the German Research Center for Geosciences estimate that the average temperature in Central Asia will rise faster and become higher than in any other region of the Earth. As a result of climate change in Central Asia, there is an intensive melting of glaciers, the area of which by the end of the 21st century may be reduced by 50%. As well as a reduction in water resources, the emergence of new mountain outburst lakes, an increase in the number of such dangerous natural disasters as landslides, mudflows, avalanches, drought, and fires. If natural disasters cause huge damage to the countries of the region every year, then the climate change impacts such as melting glaciers, the reduction of water resources, or the risk of mudflows near the disposal of uranium tailings can turn into a disaster on a regional scale. In this context, it's gratifying to note that in recent years there has been a positive process of interaction between the countries of Central Asia in the areas of combating climate change and protecting the environment. In this process, the role of Germany is very important, and many thanks to the German side for the Green Central Asia initiative. And this initiative, as you know, was launched here in Berlin back in 2020. And this initiative was aiming for strengthening regional cooperation in these spheres. Taking this opportunity, I would like to express gratitude to the German side, our colleagues from the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany, as well as the head of the program of the Green Central Asia Initiative, Dr. Karolina Milov, for the support provided to our region, including Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyz Republic, like other countries in the region, attaches great importance to this initiative and fully supports the regional projects implemented within the framework of this initiative. Among them, there are projects on glacier monitoring, discussion of a mutually beneficial mechanism for water and energy cooperation, adaptation to climate change, climate risk management, development of a drought monitoring tool, and etc., etc. Taking into account that almost every project touches on sensitive issues of the region, I would like to emphasize the importance of taking account the interests of all Central Asian countries, both in current projects and future ones. I believe that my colleagues from Central Asian countries will support me, that for our countries, one of the priority areas is adaptation to climate change. In connection with that, the strategy for adaptation to climate change developed as part of the initiative is given significant importance. In case of a positive consideration of the issue of signing this strategy at a high level, we propose to organize the relevant meeting in Bishkek. Today, the opinions of experts are increasingly heard that the unresolved water and energy issues in Central Asia can become a trigger for interstate conflicts in our region. However, the Kyrgyz Republic fundamentally disagrees with this assessment. We are convinced that cooperation in the water and energy sector can and should become as a unifying factor in Central Asia. We believe that the development within the framework of the Green Central Asia Initiative of a mutually beneficial mechanism for water and energy cooperation, taking into account the interests of all countries of the region, the best world practices, climate change, and other factors would strengthen regional cooperation and contribute to the sustainable development of all countries of Central Asia. In this view, we welcome the research approach of this initiative. We are confident that the highly qualified expertise of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, the German Research Center for Geosciences, and other partners of the initiative will contribute to the effective implementation of the initiative. The Central Asian Institute for Applied Geosciences and the German Nature Conservation Union, which are partners of the initiative, on the proposal of Kyrgyzstan and the support of the German side, can also make their valuable contribution. Dear participants, Kyrgyzstan is consistently working in accordance with the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement. And last year, our President, Mr. Japarov, announced the updated climate goals of our country. Kyrgyzstan plans, with international support, to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 44% until 2030, and by 2050 to achieve climate neutrality on the platform of green development. At the same time, Kyrgyzstan and other Central Asian countries will find it difficult to achieve climate change goals without international financial support, transfer of modern technologies, and capacity building. And in this regard, our country expresses its interest in cooperation within the framework of the new strategy of the European Union Global Gateway and the initiatives of Team Europe, which can assist the countries of Central Asia to realize the goals of sustainable development and regional cooperation. At the same time, we believe that linking the Green Central Asia Initiative with the European Union's Global Gateway strategy and Team Europe initiatives would enhance the contribution to a sustainable and green transition in Central Asian region. In conclusion, I would like to note that for many centuries, Kyrgyzstan has been a reliable bridge between Europe and Asia, and we are ready to continue to carry out our historical mission. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, and I would like to congratulate you on this very good NDC goal that you've set yourselves, especially reaching climate neutrality by 2050 is a major thing. Yes, let's come to the real concrete work on the ground, Ms. Hoven. You have been our trusted partner in Central Asia, first with the Berlin process, now with the Green Central Asia. We've talked a lot about climate security, all the nice conceptual thinking and so on. What does it mean for you? How can you put it on the ground? How can you put the boots on the ground, respecting whatever we are discussing here on climate and security? What does it mean to implement it in the project?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, how to put such a complex concept like climate and security into practice. I think first, what comes first is the recognition that there is a strong nexus between fragility, security, and climate. And then, of course, when we, for instance, start to organize for program planning in the sense of peace building or conflict resolution, we tried to bring into a climate sensitivity lens, to factor in information about climate change and its impact on conflict on the ground. The other side of the coin is, of course, when we start to plan climate programs like on adaptation or mitigation, also to take a conflict sensitivity lens and figure out how actually such programs can actually be implemented in a way that you do no harm to communities, but you strengthen resilience, and by doing so, you actually take preventive measures. So this is one point. The second important issue is really to put on a gender lens. We have heard this morning in the first two panels how important it is to recognize women as an actor to construct peace, but also as those actually change agents in local communities that build up resilience. So when we start to work on programs in the peace building field, but also in the climate field, we always concentrate very much on the female empowerment in economic and social terms. At the same time also we try to empower women to be part in conflict resolution programs, and by doing so actually it has like a double win effect. Third point, and we are coming back to this, what has just been underlined by the minister, is actually when you want to put this into practice, you need good data and good analysis. So normally we start in building up capacity at the local level, but also at the national level, that the data that is being collected, then it can be properly analyzed and fed into early warning mechanisms. This is key to give decision makers the key information that they need in order to make the right decisions on investments, but also where are they actually on those regions that are particularly hit by security and climate concerns. Without this information, possibly your action will be thinly spread and not very effective. If this information is at hand, then we would then start to empower communities, to give them the capacity that they can build up resilience. And you can take specific measures with respect to water scarcity, agriculture resilience, and so forth. We normally take a very people-centered approach. It's so important really to listen also to people, to farmers, to herders. What are their needs? What are their visions? And how would have they reacted already on climate change? Because this is now happening for quite a while, and they are adapting slowly, partially to these issues. To factor this in, to take a people-centered approach, to make sure that the voices of the local communities are heard, within a very comprehensive approach that is evidence-based. And finally, let me again come back to finance. We have heard this morning how big the needs are really, not only to insert this incremental change into our agenda, but really to recognize that to deal with climate and security issues, we need bold action. In order to do so, I think we have to, again, to capitalize national governments, to put them in a position really to access climate finance that is available at the international level. But what we still see in many, many countries at the national but also at the local level, that there is actually a lack of instruments and tools and capacity to figure out what are the right projects, to prepare them well and to present them to those institutions that are managing those climate funds. So I think that analysis, data analysis, foresight analysis, plus, so to say, to turn this into action plan, plus, so to say, the hand that we can give to governments really then to access the right funds is the type of putting it into practice what the climate and security nexus means in general terms.
I think if you allow a question to the last point you just made, because I've heard this so often, it's difficult to access climate funds, it's difficult to, let's say, do the right reporting, have the necessary guidelines in place. Is there an advice that you could give to countries what to improve, which would have the most impact on have more ready access to climate financing and to come closer and faster to implementation? Is there something that you could recommend to countries?
Well, partially, well, there are, each country is, of course, different, but what we have seen in many countries is actually that sometimes the cooperation between the national and the local level is still, can still be improved, and therefore possibly information that is available on the access of finance is not there, or actually perhaps some kind counterpart funding is not available for local governments so that they can apply for the international funds. And actually in some countries it's simply the knowledge about these financial vehicles, the facilities, that sometimes are also complicated. To transfer this knowledge into those national governments, I think is key. This is perhaps one core issues that we have seen over and over again. On the other hand, we know, of course, that the German government, as so to say, a donor in those facilities, that they also tried somehow to streamline processes to make them easier so that they can be accessible, more accessible to developing countries.
Thank you so much. We've heard time and again that science plays a key role when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis, understanding the security impacts of the climate crisis. We've heard Johan Rockström earlier today giving us a scientific presentation on where we are and how urgent the situation is. Dr. Hattermann, you are a scientist, so you provide the data that we use as those preparing political decisions, making the political decisions. Are you always aware of the, let's say, political and security dimension of the things that you provide? Or to put it differently, what kind of added value can scientific data provide in such a debate on climate and security?
Yes, first of all, thank you also from my side for inviting me. And the role in general of science I see into providing solid information to feed it into the political debate and in the end to solve conflicts, mitigate conflicts. I would like to take the example of the IPCC and of the Paris Agreement. I think most of us would agree that the Paris Agreement was a success. I mean, I know it's going up and down and there are problems with implementation and so, but it was a milestone and it is steering the political debate now. But the first step was that we had scientific agreement from Asia to Africa, to Europe, to North America, South America, the Americas, that climate change firstly is there, it is man-made, and it has a negative impact on humans. Without that, without the scientific agreement, consents, we would not have the Paris Agreement. Now, looking at Central Asia, from all what I hear back from the experts in the regions, also from CAREC, GIZ, the local experts of GIZ and the hydrometeorological institutes in the region, is that people, the experts, understand climate change is there, it has already manifested, and it has mostly negative impacts. Our role now is, of course, to communicate the results together, for example, with CAREC and the local experts and GIZ to disseminate the information, to feed it into the political debate. And what I think the next step really is that we have to better quantify as accurate as possible how the impacts would look like under different levels of climate change. So seeing that climate change is there does not say that it stops now. And it will go on, and any adaptation measure has to apply to a certain level of global warming. And otherwise, the whole work is in vain there. The whole implementation is in vain, and or the whole adaptation is in vain. And there I see our role now, together with the partners, again, the experts in the regions, but also with our German colleagues, German Research Center for Geosciences, and of course also the German Kazakh University, GIZ again, that we quantify as good as possible the possible impacts, because this will then feed or will be the basis for any decision making. And I hope and think that doing so we can also mitigate, even solve conflicts. And in the end, the agreements, of course, have to be, as with the Paris Agreement, international, because CO2, greenhouse gases, are international. They are global. And the same is, to some extent, also with water. Water, especially in Central Asia, is transnational. We have mainly transboundary rivers. And this, of course, then demands also for international treaties agreements. And here, we would like to feed as good and solid information into the debate as possible.
Thank you. Not all political decision makers are trained climate scientists or hydrologists. Do you find that your data, the scientific findings, the evidence that you provide is understood, digested, and well handled by the politicians? What's your personal experience here?
So we do it up and down, actually. In our institute, we are very much at the interface from science to implementation, actually, and not only in Central Asia, but we have a focus now there. I think, yes, possibly it's sometimes also a question of generation. So, and we heard in the previous session an expert from Central Asia, a young one, and he wanted to drive really the debate from the young people side, and I think it's improving. And I also think that it is a bit also event-driven. We had huge impacts already. We had droughts. Many years of droughts, but then on the other hand also floods, so that people see that something is happening and that they have to adapt. And this is, of course, then in the end also driving the debate.
Thank you. So let's become even more practical. Mr. Makhmudov, you're director of the CAREC Center in Kazakhstan, a regional environment center that is placed between government, science, and civil society in a way, so you're interfacing with all parts of society. So what is the difference you, as director of CAREC, can make on climate security in the region? How does your practical work look like on this topic?
Well, first, let me begin with expressing my gratitude for inviting me and having a chance to echo the voices of those who are trying to bring together the countries, the stakeholders of the region together for concerted actions to mitigate negative impacts of climate change and to take adaptive measures. The Regional Environmental Center for Central Asia was established in 2001 by the governments of all the 5 Central Asian countries, that is Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, with one regional mandate to assist the countries in addressing environmental and sustainability challenges across the region. So by being an intergovernmental organization, the difference we make at the regional level are rather significant. I remember this morning answering to the question of how could countries better act to the negative impacts of climate change. His Excellency Deputy Minister of the Kyrgyz Republic mentioned that regional economic platforms need to be created. Rightly, organizations like CAREC are serving as a platform and resource for intergovernmental cross-sectoral dialogue among the Central Asian countries, supporting successful implementation and application of innovative environmental and climate change approaches. So indeed, We haven't yet created an economic platform yet, something I noted down here, but regarding environment, climate, water management, nature-based solutions, and political approaches, we are already creating platforms to serve the needs of the region. For example, the water, energy, and food security, the so-called Nexus approach, was introduced in the region for the first time about 5 years ago by CAREC with the support of EU project. So since then, we have summoned a regional Nexus working group represented by the sectoral specialists of each country meeting twice a year. So this working group has developed transboundary projects in the interest of 2 or more countries of the region, even prioritized those projects according to their urgency and probability of investment. Today, the Nexus approach is one of the main ideas behind successful design and development of plans and strategies in every sector and country of the region. Another example is the difference that we make in the region is using our network. We are reaching out to the private sector. Currently, we are working with some small and medium enterprises and providing them knowledge and know-how on sustainable consumption and production practices for sustainable development. So under the Switch Asia program, we are co-implementing with Adelphi and a line of other partners. We are providing the business an opportunity to exchange their experiences, not only within the country with their other partners, but also with the neighboring countries. Last week, I was speaking in the ministerial conference, Environment for Europe, and the moderator was, when he was presenting CAREC, he said, "You are the in-between organization, so tell us how you do it." Well, that was quite an interesting introduction. So what I would say is just getting back to the example that His Excellency Deputy Minister brought this morning, the Chu River is one of the rivers we are working as well. So we created water basin management councils that are managing water resources on the Chu and Talas from the Kyrgyz and Kazakh side of the river. So another example is our support to a water quality assessment council between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan down the same river. So we help the council organizing meetings, and an added value we bring to this process is we invite other neighboring countries of the region to observe and learn from this experience of this transboundary cooperation. Well, I can continue bringing in more examples from the region, but shortly I would say that we also work with the young people who are committed to carry out their country's sustainable development goals. We are also working with and supporting women professionals, water professionals, who are engaged in water diplomacy in the countries of Central Asia and Afghanistan. The project is called Women, Water Management and Conflict Prevention. We are helping raise their access to the decision-making level. So we are also working with the government and civil society of the Central Asian region. Well, at the end, I would say we may not be the solution to the challenges of the region, but just like this morning it was said, just like the climate change, we are surely the catalyzers in solving the challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Makhmudov. It sounds really like, perhaps not the complete solution, but being able to provide important building blocks for the solution is already a major step. And I understand that you're going down to grassroots level, to the communities level, so this all sounds very practical and hands-on. But let's turn back to the political sphere, State Minister. When I joined the Foreign Service, we used to do foreign policy here. Now we do climate foreign policy. And now we even talk about preventive climate foreign policy. So what is it and why should we do it here in the Foreign Office? Can you explain this to us?
Yes, we've come to understand now that the climate crisis is the key security threat and thus should be at the heart of foreign policy, and therefore, we took this decision to move the whole international climate agenda to this ministry in order to really streamline it also throughout all our foreign policy, that we really use the whole capacity and spirit of our diplomatic network, of our embassies, to work towards this goal of preventing temperatures from rising, too much at least, and preventing in the sense more harm in the sense that we want to support communities in adapting to the climate change that is inevitable. So this is these are the two perspectives on it that we need to prevent in the sense of mitigation, of changing our business models, of changing the way we work, the way we get to work, the way we consume, the way we eat at home. I mean, this is really, we really need to transform everything in order to prevent temperatures from rising beyond a bearable degree. And then we also, for the climate change that scientists like you are predicting, we need to adapt our societies. And I really think this can be not only, I mean, this is a huge transformative agenda, and we need to do it to say it bluntly, for a bad reason, right? Because we haven't acted earlier, because we are here now at this stage already where we already see temperatures rising, where we know that some more climate change is inevitable. But on the other hand, it can also be really something positive and inspiring and transformative if we really address this crisis. And I found it really inspiring what you just said, that you're working, for instance, when you work on water management, you actually bring women into decision-making processes. No? So we can use new projects and new mechanisms now to address this crisis, to actually create a better world. No? Or another example, a climate-friendly way of mobility also helps to reduce air pollution and thus helps to prevent diseases that are related to bad air qualities, right? So there are so many situations where we know that this transformation that we're going through actually not only prevents something bad from happening, but also helps to create actually better societies. And I think here, particularly, also the approaches that have been implemented under the Green Central Asia brand, if I may say so, to manage water. I mean, this is really something really, really important to reduce the climate-related security risks also in other parts of the world, and that other parts of the world can potentially also learn from. I mean, you, Minister, you were very positive about the achievements already done in this field in your region. So maybe that's something that other regions that now face similar threats can actually learn from.
Thank you, State Minister. Let's take advantage of the presence of Deputy Minister Moldogaziev from the Kyrgyz Republic. Your country is a mountainous country with lots of glaciers that are beautiful to look at, but also critical for water availability. And of course, at the same time, they are highly vulnerable to climate change, and these glaciers are shrinking. So what do you do to raise attention to this fact and to get support from the international community to deal with the problem?
Yes, as you correctly noted, about 95% of our territory are mountainous areas. And of course, the main problem we face is melting of our glaciers on our just mountain peaks. And of course, it creates another chain of problems like migration, socio-economic and food security problems, and so on. And of course, the first goal of our country was to bring these problems to the attention of the international community. And this year, we are going to table draft resolution entitled Sustainable Development of Mountains in the General Assembly, UN General Assembly. And of course, the first reason of this initiative is to draw attention. And second, of course, just to find, to elaborate and finalize the proposals which are really needed just to solve this problem. The climate change and glaciers melting, and also we have other related problems as saving snow leopard and so on. And of course, we are not alone. We have a so-called Global Mountain Partnership, and there are many countries in this Global Mountain Partnership from all around the world, from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, from America. And of course, we hope that with the assistance of our Global Mountain Partnership partners, we would be able just to find the best solutions to solve and to face these problems of global climate change and et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's again about scientific input, Dr. Hattermann. So you provide data, such as data on shrinking glaciers to countries, and you basically encourage countries to act upon these data. But shrinking glaciers is only one aspect of changed availability of water resources. What kind of advice can you offer to countries to best prepare for changed water availability or less water being available for their purposes?
Okay, yeah, let's be specific and looking at Central Asia. What we see in the results we have so far is that it is really crucial how climate change manifests. I mean, how much more global warming we have. So, and it might be if we are below 2, around 1.7 or something, that there are negative impacts. For example, the water cycle is an internal part of the climate cycle, and there will be further impacts, extremes and so. But there might be, for example, also that you have an increase in crop yields because you can switch from summer crops to winter crops. So there might be also some chances and a window of opportunity, say. When with higher global warming, it is all in vain. Yeah? So you should also raise your voice. This should be part of what you do to really push the big emitters like Europe, North America, China, and so that they really mitigate, because I think only then you have really the chance to sustain, to adapt in a sustainable way. And this is what we see so far. But in the end, of course, we have then to be more local, more regional, and investigate more and do it together with the experts to find really profound and sustainable solutions. I would say really investigate or invest into science so that you have really solid information, that you have also the space where you can maneuver, where you can formulate adaptation measures, and in the end also to implement them. And there are many bad developments, but there are also some windows of opportunity, and you should take the chance.
If you allow, just a second question to this. I mean, how important in your mind is it to make scientific data transparent and open and available to everybody who needs to know about them? Because in some countries, some data are kept as a kind of state secret. What's your take on this?
Yeah, this is so. In the end, I'm fully for transparency, obviously, and because we also rely on it. I mean, how can we work in a foreign country without the cooperation, without the data? And this is of utmost crucial importance, and also to moderate and communicate our findings. This we also learned over the years. Firstly, we were much too scientific, I guess, so people could not understand also what we tried to tell them. But also, I hope at least we improved there, and we have, of course, the local partners providing us with feedback, and CAREC, GIZ, they are providing us with platforms where we can then disseminate the information, and we are often actually sitting together with stakeholders, really, because people feel now and see now that climate change really hits them, so that it is negative for them, And they are really now asking for how can I adapt, how will the future be? And not only in Central Asia, it happens also in Germany, it happens also here. And by that, we also, of course, also learn to communicate and hopefully, I think, and improve.
Interesting learning experience probably for both sides. Ms. Hoven, we would be at a miss if we would not make use of the fact that the GIZ is globally engaged on climate-related projects. So we talked about the Central Asia region here, but can you give us some good examples from other parts of the world where you felt that the approach, being climate sensitive, security sensitive in your work, has had good results and has been very fruitful for the debate as we are leading here?
Yeah, certainly I would like to underline that regional approaches become a key and center. This is not only true for Central Asia, but we have been working with the PIC also, for instance, in Western Africa and the Sahel region to put crisis analysis, crisis risk analysis in place and to inform decision-making, not only for one country, but also to take into account cross-border issues such as migration, conflicts about arable land and water, that it's still available for herders and farmers as the regional approaches. And this is holds true for the Sahel region, for instance. You know that, of course, in the Sahel region, conflict or at least tensions between herders and farmers have a long history, so this is nothing new. But of course, the severe impact of climate change, already very visible, makes an impact on conflict and makes more difficult conflict resolution mechanisms. Of course, we can work on specific issues like to conserve land, to make it further usable for agriculture. We can think about smaller dams, conserve water, speak about water efficiency in the agricultural sector. So many good examples how we can try to build up technologies and knowledge at the local level to deal with the impact of climate change and make community more resilient. But certainly, still we have to think about, for instance, extreme weather events, bigger floods or bigger droughts that can't be resolved with those local mechanisms. So first of all, I think we need to know better what are the hotspots in the region. Therefore, we need this climate risk analysis and foresight instruments. But additionally, we need some kind of a protection shield. A mechanism, financial mechanism that puts governments and local communities into position that when such an extreme weather event hits a region, that they can react quickly, provide food and fodder, and can make sure that the nutrition of people is safe. And these type of additional financial mechanisms are more viable if you consider them at the broader scale, not just country by country. This can be forecast funding or other mechanisms, but I think these are also all good experience where you can complement action on the ground, on knowledge, capacity building, with some kind of a financial mechanism that is put in place in order to help when other mechanisms don't resolve the situation. We have been working, for instance, also on with countries in the Indian Ocean region, where there are also regional alliances, and we brought the security issues and advice into their own planning on the blue economy, on how to preserve the oceans and how actually to protect themselves against extreme weather events. This is another example from another region that so far has been quite successful. How can you measure it? I think it's really, you can measure it in life saves and damage prevented, and partially also with respect to the speed in the reaction when actually the worst happens and how fast you get to the people that are in need. And these are a couple of examples where we, together with local partners, with think tanks or research institutions, provide, support in getting the basis right for decision making. But then, of course, it takes a lot of effort, joint effort by the international community to build up the systems that are needed to reach people and then make them so robust that even if it gets to the worst point, that they can still react. There's still a long way to go, I think.
Yeah, sounds like a big project lying ahead of us. Your first point was on regional cooperation. And we talked about this also in the Central Asian region, but sometimes there are regions which find it hard to cooperate with each other. So what do you do then? Or do you find that the increased understanding for the necessity to cooperate when it comes to climate-related issues helps to bring about regional cooperation? What are your experiences here?
Yeah, I think perhaps in the past we somehow tackled regional cooperation on specific issues as standalone issues, either water, land, perhaps migratory issues, migration issues. But possibly, as we see now, multiple crises that are actually affecting countries, it takes a more cross-cutting approach. And therefore, I would like to come back to State Minister Lührmann's points. I think this is a good reason why actually diplomacy should take on board those issues, but across the spectrum of themes, migration, climate, security issues, and actually discuss this at highest level with partners, not to single out one only issue, but make it part of a bigger dialogue where also actually the needs and the visions and or views of partners in other countries are being brought on board wholeheartedly. And then I think you get perhaps into a dialogue that leads to conflict resolution. I think these are the lessons learned of the past, which means also for us as implementing agencies, we have to think much more forcefully about these integrated approaches, not single out simply one theme, but really think across fragility, climate, water, energy issues, because they are so interrelated nowadays that we only come to the best solutions for countries if we really think them at once and make sure that the interconnections are fully observed and also then put into place when it comes to implementation.
Yeah, thank you for giving diplomacy a renewed role in this context. Before I move on, I would just like to announce we probably have a few minutes for questions from the audience. So if you think about making a comment, asking a question, get ready, put down your notes, because you will be given a microphone. You can pose your questions in a few minutes. Before we move to the questions, one more question to Mr. Makhmudov. Talked about regional cooperation, representing a region with the Regional Center for Environment at CAREC. How do you see your region moving in the context of the Paris Agreement, the COP sequence? Do you see some identity for the region coming up here? Are the countries coming together? Or how do you see Central Asia moving ahead in the COP process?
Well, all the 5 Central Asian countries have ratified the Paris Agreement, and they have also submitted their first nationally determined contributions. And according to our latest records, all the 5 Central Asian countries are going to update their NDCs and submit them in the next conference of parties, before the next conference of parties. So while exchanging in these their commitments under this Paris Agreement, right now countries are also setting up long-term low-emission development strategies towards net zero emission. So that's one example, and the other one could be the Kazakhstan is already negotiating with the other neighboring countries on the possibility of joining the Global Methane Initiative and use of methane as a valuable energy source. As we know, the 3 countries of the region that are heavily dependent on the fossil fuels like gas, oil, and coal, that may be a very good alternative solution for these countries. So these are the examples and a strong indication of countries' staunch intent in undertaking international commitments on decarbonization. So at COP26 last year, for the first time in the history of climate negotiations, CAREC has organized a pavilion for the Central Asian countries where we helped the national delegations hold a line of bilateral and regional meetings. So this pavilion served as a window for all the activities and measures undertaken in the region to be recognized and seen at the global level. So also at COP26, we have supported countries in improving, since COP26, we are supporting the countries in improving their climate reporting through Climate Action Transparency Initiative. Being transparent in climate actions is a prerequisite for Article 6 engagement, which is a foundation for a post-2020 carbon market. And Article 6 is also a key part of the Paris Agreement that allows the countries to voluntarily cooperate to meet their nationally determined contributions and use the possibilities of non-market approaches. Under the Green Central Asia Initiative, with the support of GIZ, we are currently also organizing the meetings of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and parliamentarians of Central Asia. And these meetings are pivoted towards regional coherence in cooperation of the Central Asian countries on climate policy, finance, and NDC implementation. These kind of platforms provide them a possibility to exchange and share their experiences. Maybe the last example I will bring here is one of the countries of the region, Kazakhstan, has already developed and approved their eco-codex, environmental codex. And through our platform, through this platform of the meeting of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and parliamentarians, the example of Kazakhstan was shared with Uzbekistan and also with Kyrgyzstan. These are the next two countries that are about to also approve these environmental codes.
Wonderful.
So there are very good indications, in general, there are very good indications that there are currently countries at the regional level, at the regional and national scale, they're really doing a lot. But it also takes an opportunity or possibility for these countries to demonstrate to the world all the measures that are undertaken at the regional and national levels.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makhmudov. I think I was a bit too generous earlier in my remark in encouraging you to ask questions. I'm misreading the countdown here, which is not giving the right time. So I think we have to come to a conclusion now. I'm sorry that we have to cut it short here. I thank all the panelists, especially State Minister Lührmann and the Deputy Minister of the Kyrgyz Republic for being here, but also all of you. I thank you in the audience for having the stamina and the concentration to sit here in the late afternoon and follow a not so easy discussion. I'm very grateful that we had a rich and encouraging day here, and State Minister Lührmann needs to rush off now, I understand, but I would like to hand over to the Master of Ceremonies to give us some concluding remarks, I understand.